Hi, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Autumn Hamry. I'm the Field Marketing Manager here at Hyperproof, and I'll be getting us started. Today, you'll be watching the second installment of our GRC Maturity Model Series, featuring a panel discussion with industry experts on their perspectives on refining your approach to GRC maturity. In this interactive webinar, our expert panel will explore topics that can help you evaluate and accelerate your GRC maturity. A bit of housekeeping points before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, we welcome you to enter them into the Q&A box for our speakers to enter after the presentation. If you are having any problems with audio or visuals during the event, please try leaving the presentation and re-entering. If this doesn't work, please let us know you're having trouble in the Q&A box. The event is being recorded and will be available on demand on our Bright Talk channel after the event ends. And lastly, attendees will receive an email with a link to the on-demand event after the webinar airs. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rishi Mehta, Senior Manager at Accenture Security, Sherry Hotman, Partner and BCISO at Hotman Group, Jack Nicholson, CISO at Immersion 6, and Sue Bergamo, CIO and CISO at BTE Partners. And lastly, Kay McLattery, Hyperproof's Field CISO. Take it away, team.
Fantastic. Thanks, Autumn. So I'm Kane, the Field CISO for Hyperproof. I'm also a senior member of the IEEE for contributions in cybersecurity, and I've been in cybersecurity for nearly 30 years now. I'm also the author of the GRC maturity model, and I'm really delighted today to be joined with such a star-studded panel. Friends, can you spend just a minute each introducing yourselves, please? Let's go with, I don't know, how about we'll go left to right. Rishi?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name's Rishi Mehta. I live in Virginia with my wife. Been partnering with Hyperproof for a while now, and on a day-to-day basis, my mission is to make GRC easy. So I lead the North America practice for Accenture on cyber risk and compliance as a service. And on a day-to-day, I find myself solving GRC problems across industries. So happy to be here and look forward to sharing some perspectives with you.
Fantastic. Sherry?
Hello, thank you so much. Sherry Hotman. I'm a partner at Hotman Group, and we too have an excellent relationship with Hyperproof. Really love the platform. And Rishi, just as you said, we try to make it easy for companies as well. It seems easy, but it's not, and it tends to be daunting and overwhelming. And so I was a practitioner, predominantly coming out of banking and financial services. So I know how daunting and overwhelming it can be, especially for folks who are trying to run this. And so really it is helping companies to build and implement and run the right size program, and all on a fantastic tool. So thank you so much, King.
Fantastic. Let's go over to Jack.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Jack Nicholson. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a virtual chief security officer for Inversion 6. I've been in security for about 25 years in government, banking, and manufacturing. And GRC has been something that has absolutely helped me mature my program and has helped me grow and be more effective as a security leader. And I look forward to sharing some tips with you guys today.
Fantastic. And finally to Sue.
Hi, everyone. Sue Bergamo. I'm a global CIO and CISO for BTE Partners, and currently consulting with organizations around GRC and cybersecurity. So I'll bring my expertise to this discussion and help you understand the model and why it's so important to have.
Fantastic. And with that, let's get started. So we'll want to start a little bit about why our audience is here today, or at least some speculation. The reason I think that you're all here today in the audience is that you're wanting to refine your approach to GRC maturity, but also to learn some practical steps, some actionable things you can do to evaluate, self-evaluate, and accelerate your GRC maturity journey. And so today we're going to be hearing from my panel of industry experts on some practical approaches and some really effective strategies to do just that. So with that, we're going to bring up our first polling question. I just want to kind of get a read of the room to get a sense of who's here. Autumn, can you bring up our first polling question, please? And then we'll kind of talk about that. And you'll recognize it is about the CrowdStrike event, which is always an exciting thing to talk about. And it's about more on resilience. Autumn, are we able to bring that up, or is it on screen? Oh, I do see it is polling. Okay, so it's just not showing up on my screen. That's fun. We will give it a moment, and we're starting to get some responses in here. And I think we'll give it maybe 30 seconds more. So far, it looks like, sort of a 3 on a 5. 1 being not at all prepared, 5 being a, hey, wow, this is a challenge for us. 5 being, hey, we're really, what do we want to do? 1 very unprepared, 5 very prepared. I think that's fair. And I think that's probably enough time for this panel question. Looks like panelists, looks like we've kind of got, now we've gone 50-50. Wow, somebody came in just at the last end, so it has very shifted. So about half of our audience is, oh wow, okay, now everybody's hitting the button. I'm going to just shut up for a second and let this go. This is kind of fun. I'm watching the live results come in.
It's like being in Vegas.
It is less noisy, thank goodness.
Very much so.
It's so much nicer that it's not so noisy as it is in Las Vegas. Oh my God.
But just as risky.
Oh, that's good too. Just as risky.
Oh, well played, well played. All right, I think we probably got enough time on this question here. Panelists, what we can see here is it's more feel that they're very prepared as opposed to moderately prepared or underprepared. Any comments from the panelists before we move to our quick next polling questions for the audience?
I mean, my only thought was if you're, and I'm not trying to judge anybody, obviously, but I always tell companies in risk assessments, like, pull out all the stops, like don't overestimate. And I'm not saying anybody's not, but there's a danger in overestimating versus thinking you're on and then nobody really feels the need to improve. I see that unfortunately in compliance all the time. So that would be my thought. And I think we're going to be talking about that, Kane.
Oh, I know we are. Any other panelists on the first polling question about just being resilient?
I'm very glad to hear that people are focusing on that. That is a topic that has bit me in the butt many times. I always, everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face. And then you find out how resilient you really are.
Oh, I love that.
CrowdStrike example was a perfect one about being prepared. And a lot of companies found that like 8 million users found themselves unprepared. It was really unfortunate.
So true.
Yeah. One thing that I stress on a lot when we talk resilience is you can have the best plans in place, you can have the best technology backups in place, but the people element of being resilient is often overlooked because human beings, we tend to regress to old ways and forget all plans when we are under pressure. So
true.
Being resilient and continuing to refresh that muscle memory to build your people to be resilient is something that I stress on a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rishi. And I think we're going to end our second poll, which was about talking to senior leadership. Panelists, as we look at the results here, it looks like we've got some pretty prepared people actually here. And one or more people who are probably a bit on the anxious side. Commentary from everyone as we get the third poll launched up?
I will say that this is probably the one area that most individuals have the most anxiety, because there's really two schools of executives out there. One is definitely mature around resilience and cyber and GRC and the understanding of why it's important. And then there's the whole other end of the spectrum where you have to do education from the bottom up. So it's hard.
Yeah. And it goes back to what Rishi said. Ultimately, people are at the base of all of this. And so those communication strategies become so key and critical to all of this.
Yeah. I found that when I thought I had good relationships with my stakeholders and my leaders, I found that I was more updating them and I was having less conversations with them. And when I started to shift my approach, and I started to be more open to where our weaknesses were and started to talk to them more around, how would we respond to this kind of event, and less providing them, how am I going to defend everything, and less talking about, how well we're doing, and providing less status updates, more real discussions. I found that it really changed. And what I thought my good conversations were maybe weren't as good as they were.
That's great.
Fantastic. Well, let's move to our third and final polling question, which I think we've had on screen for a while there. Panelists, capable of communicating that resilience, that really goes to crisis communications and also having the internal ability to have that sense of what they should be communicating. Any comments there? It looks like our audience is evenly split.
I
So
will
I
say,
think,
oh,
go
go ahead. No, go ahead, Rishi.
No, I was going to touch on a, a shift now with the market. People, end user customers are now more and more savvy about how cyber impacts their day-to-day lives. And it was, a light bulb went off when, about 2 weeks ago when CrowdStrike happened. My mom, who's only in the last 2 years learned how to use her iPhone, was asking me about the implications of how this can impact our life. So we have a full spectrum of generations that now sees how cyber events can impact their lives. And so if you are able to communicate to your audience, to your customers, to your partners, how resilient you are differentiating your business.
Yeah.
You are demonstrating to them how you uphold their trust.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, on top of that, so many companies rely upon their compliance instruments to do a lot of that communication for them, which is important, certainly not knocking it. And then you've got the dreaded security questionnaires that kick in to try to help with that communication. But I think there's so much more opportunity to have a strategy, again, of how you not only communicate that when asked, but also how you stay on top of how you're going to build that trust and keep that trust ongoing.
That strategy is key. The business continuity planning. Organizations that struggled with CrowdStrike were organizations that didn't have a good partnership between IT and operations on business continuity. They struggled to fail over to manual operations. They struggled to get the word out to people that mattered. And we found that was a key, aspect of where things broke down.
I found this year that the theme for around a lot of my clients that I'm working with is that they have the incident response plan, they have business continuity, and they have disaster recovery. But what they failed to do was the communications plan around incident response. And they were caught short because the inevitable always happens. And they were like scrambling, who does what, who communicates with who. And it took a lot of time away from remediation, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, I also think this really helps us understand who's in our audience today, and I want us to get stuck into our questions. And so for every one of our panel questions, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to read the question out, and then I'll switch it to a presenter view so we can all see one another instead of just staring at some slide. And I'm going to pick at random who's going to go first on each one of these, and I'd say our panelists should have about 2-ish minutes each to discuss the topic. And I'm looking for this to be very lively. Also, if you're attending this and if you've got a question for one of our world-class experts, please do drop it in that question box. That's the question mark shown on screen. Jack, I'm going to put this first question to you. And the question is, why is the GRC maturity model so important?
Thank you. Actually, I think it goes back to those 3 questions that we started the whole presentation with. Those 3 questions that we asked are really a thread through to tell us where you really are with your GRC maturity. And I think we can see that in order to be able to have a mature security program, you need to have a mature GRC program. And companies that do that, they're better capable of responding when an event happens. They're more aware of what risks their organization has. Their senior leadership understands what's being worked on. They are part of the prioritization of that, and they're getting regular updates of what's happening. So those first 3 questions that we asked is kind of that thread through how mature is your GRC program. And you really can't have a mature security program without a mature GRC program.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jack. Panelist, who wants to go in next?
Yeah, I'll just add to what he said. I had this conversation with a client just recently that they were complaining that their executives aren't really taking the action and holding accountability down. And kind of turned it a little bit that it goes bottom up as well. And exactly to what Jack just said, that if we can't clearly articulate bottom up what executives need to, one, understand, and then two, action, and then of course coach them through what decisions need to be made, then that's a problem. And that all starts with a program being built at those layers, and not just a check the box program, but one that came to, I know what your passion is maturity, because this stuff is not about pass fail. It's not about set it and forget it, we're good, so now I can go do something else. It is this constant pursuit of improvement, this constant pursuit of maturity. Security changes every 5 seconds, and so we've got to stay on top of that. So there's this relationship between the program that's down here, the executives that are up here, and basically going both directions so that people can be informed and action what they need to action.
Fantastic. And Rishi or Sue?
Go ahead.
Sue, let's go for you first.
So I'm going to put a little different twist on this. Maturity is really around having a good risk management program. And if you have a solid risk management program, it'll help you with that continuous improvement that was just talked about. But it's also a mechanism for decision making, because if you understand your maturity level overall and you understand how you can score risk, then the decision making becomes a lot clearer and a lot easier. That risk should be aligned to corporate goals and objectives, so that when you're trying to prioritize the risks that have been scored. Sometimes the big ones can't be done because they're going to cost too much or they're going to be too long, but you can still pick away at them. So it'll help you again in the decision making around where should I be spending my time and where do I need to become more mature in my security controls.
Fantastic. And Rishi, we're just going to go direct to you.
Absolutely. So great themes here, right? I heard so many good points around maturity model. And what I'm about to share is thematically in line with those things. But when I look at maturity, there's an element of a framework-driven model to understand where you are. Oftentimes, when you're prioritizing business decisions, an understanding of where do you even want to be and why do you want to go there is something that a maturity model will give you. At the end of the day, the business needs to survive. The business has many decisions to make. It gives GRC leaders an opportunity to justify why they want to invest in certain activities or initiatives. It gives traceability to measure how you are progressing and what your money is going towards. It also gives a plan and a roadmap on what does the future look like. So there's elements of doing things better, people, process, technology that you can get a view on. There's visibility into what is the GRC program doing, and there's better decision making. So those are my 2 cents on why the maturity model is important.
Fantastic. Thank you. And for our second panel question here, as I just get it up there, Sue, we're going to go to you for this one here. And I think we've all seen this as well. It's actually a large part of what led me to write the GRC maturity model. So Sue, I'll start with you. What should organizations do if they don't have a consistent GRC enterprise process, or I suppose processes?
I think the first thing to do is really start with an assessment so you can figure out where your maturity is in your program. I counsel people all the time. If I've worked for companies and have had clients that said, we got to do it all, this year or, this month or whatever. And it depends on how much time and resources they have to throw at a program. But if you're just starting out, you can pick a model, right? It's better to pick something than not have anything at all. And then go with the pace of the organization. Pick the most important controls that you can bring into your program, and then do them at least at a baseline so you're comfortable with them, because you can't go from 0 to 100 overnight, but at least establish a baseline. And then the following period, control period or year or whatever the time frame is, then you go into continuous improvement and you try to mature what you have to get to that next step. The other way that you can do it is you can bring in an auditor and external or internal auditor to look in at assessing your controls, and they'll tell you where the gaps are. And from there, again, you can start improving on the processes.
Fantastic. Who wants to take this one next?
I can. So kind of building on what, Sue was saying around, you want to have in order to build your security program, you want to be aligned with an industry framework, right? NIST, ISO, CIS, right? Something. And you want to be able to pick those controls. You want to be able to move things forward, but you can't do everything at once. And the GRC becomes that vehicle to be able to prioritize those. But just like your security program needs to be aligned to a framework, you want your GRC to be aligned to a framework. And that's where we've come up with the document with this GRC maturity model to understand what are the key aspects of a good GRC program. Who would be the right stakeholders? What are the right things to cover? How to really conduct a proper GRC, so that way your flow of that is mature and it's aligned back to an industry standard. Just like you would want to see your security program aligned to an industry standard, you want to do the same thing with your GRC. They're going to be unique. Every time I start a GRC group at a different company, there's always little nuances, but there's always things that are the consistent, and there are things that are the same everywhere because it goes back to kind of that GRC maturity model. And what we're hoping is through this document, you're going to be able to use this as a guide to put in place or to bolster your existing GRC program to make it more effective.
Thanks, Jack. And I will go to, who wants to go next? Sherry, Rishi?
Sure. Yeah, I want to pick up on the one word and everything they said times 100. I totally agree. It does say enterprise process, and I think that's a point that gets often overlooked. This stuff births out of security. Security is very important. I'm a security professional as well. We all are. But the reality is this really is an enterprise thing that requires engagement across the entire organization and up and down. And I think the answer is just like what was said already, like you can't do nothing, but you can't do everything. And so you got to try to hit in the middle. Also, it was said it's part of a strategy and it's part of alignment to the business objectives. Like there's so many nuances to this. And so the reality is you need to fix this problem. It's part of being a good steward of a business. It's very critically important and really just quite honestly can't be overlooked and ignored, but we all see it every day. Companies totally trying to ignore this or trying to substitute just compliance for this. And that'll do it. And it's a piece of it, but it's not all of it. Sue brought it up earlier. This is ultimately about risk. And so that's very critical. So I think the answer is that do something, can't do nothing. Don't do 100 because then you're going to get stuck and never make any progress. You should definitely look outside of yourself, as Jack mentioned. Don't just make up your own program, but look at the frameworks, look what other companies, go to events, talk to people like us, how we can help, and listen to events like that.
A lot of good points there for bringing in external viewpoints. Rishi, you've probably seen a couple things over the years.
Absolutely. And human nature to do the best thing or the most talked about thing. I don't recall one conversation in the last 3 months where I talk to clients and they say, well, what are we doing about AI, right? Without having foundational GRC programs in place. So as Jack mentioned and talked about having a model and alignment back to a model, that is very important. But consistency drives everything. You could be doing the most simplest of processes if you do them consistently versus doing the most level 4 maturity thing only once. Consistency is the way to go forward for risk reduction, because at the end of the day, GRC is out there to enable the business, is enabled to demonstrate compliance, is to have oversight on things and decisions that are being made. So that's my 2 cents on this one.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rishi. And I'll remind our audience, if you have questions for our star-studded panel, please do drop them in the questions box there. Rishi, we're going to start with you for this one here. And the question is, if you're a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, why would you advocate for the use of the GRC maturity model?
So I will say there's many publications out there that I've read, and level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maturity. I've seen various models talk about, you are here, what do you do there? But the level of detail, Kane, that I saw in the model, the GRC maturity model here, gives prescriptive guidance on what actions you can take. Oftentimes, we see the aspiration to go somewhere from where you are, but the path to get there is not clear. So, putting the CISO hat on, though, using the model again gives you a map, it gives you a sense of direction, it gives you an ability to make decisions. But this specific GRC model stands out in everything that I've read and consumed and the level of detail that it has.
Yeah, I would totally echo that. It's very well thought out. It is that granular level of detail. How many times have we seen, read this one sentence and then pick 0 through 5? Okay, yay, we're there. And so that I do like that it's thought out. It's not just like the control set or the requirement set, but even inside of that for different like work streams and different aspects to think through. And so I think that's a level of like layers to think through as well. And I like that. For a CISO, I think that, they're often seen as the know people. And so in the organization. And so this is something outside of them to be like, I'm not just making this up, trying to annoy everybody, but this is something like a standard consistency. And so definitely it gives them something to point to that we can all, as an executive team, kind of look at and go, okay, what are we going to do with this now?
I think too that there's a little bit of a fallacy in the industry that if you have technology in place, then you have a program, a cyber program, and that all you need to do is manage and watch alerts. And that is so far from the truth. So we as CISOs, we do follow the triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which means we have to understand and implement our programs through people, process, and tech. So people is one thing that's educating. Tech, we all know, we have various technologies, but the people part is really where the GRC comes in. And without that third leg, you do not have a solid cybersecurity program. So all of these things go hand in hand. And if you ask a lot of experienced CISOs, they'll tell you, once the tech is implemented and optimized, I've got to throw that in because it's not just about the implementation, make sure it's being used effectively for your team. But after that's done, honestly, we spend the majority of our time on GRC, managing risk through compliance frameworks and models, and understanding how all of those go hand in hand to protect our company, our employees, and our data.
Fantastic. A lot of great points shared there. Jack, last on this one for you.
So I want to take, there was a second question on there, how it's helped you professionally. And that's been something for me for GRC. When I first started to do security, right, I had a GRC committee because we needed it to check the box. I had all the right people there. I present it to everybody. And it was a very one-way communication. It was very updates. It wasn't very effective. And what I found was I wasn't having the right conversations. I wasn't having the right engagement with the stakeholders. And I needed to grow as a professional. What it is you kind of need to leave room for people to kind of provide their own feedback, right? You need to make sure that your GRC committee should not be used as a bludgeon to force controls into the organization. You really want to use it as a way to have a conversation about the controls, about the risks, and leave room for other people to have their input, right? That way it's more of a discussion, and then you bring the stakeholders more to the table. And then when you do enact that change, you're not just pushing it through for some regulatory reason or some security reason. You've really got adoption from other business leaders. And that's where I think GRC for me really helped me mature as a CISO, and it helped my program be more effective.
Fantastic. And I love that Jack is reading over my shoulder here about professional benefits you could see. And I think we should not just take this as a question of professional benefits as a CISO, but what if you're a GRC practitioner? What if you're a manager? What if you're a contributor? Let's talk about some different roles here. Rishi, let's go with you next, and then we'll go around the room.
Well, professional benefits in using the model.
I'd say so, yes.
If you're a GRC practitioner, it gives you knowledge about how things work end to end. Oftentimes, if you're up and coming in your career and trying to learn what GRC really is, this model read end to end, highlighted with different colors of highlight, will give you everything you need to learn about GRC. But other than that, I think the benefits are common and underlying, right? Professionally, you will be able to credentialize yourself as an advisor better. Professionally, you will be able to report upwards and oversee downwards better because you have this map. And the outcomes of all of that is growth, right? So that's my perspective.
Fantastic, thank you. Sue, Sherry, you want to come in
Yeah,
on this? Sue, I see you nodding there. Let's go.
I think that with these models, it's super important that you have an understanding of where you're going and how you're going to get there. And I think we've talked a little bit about this. But so I'm a certified auditor as well as a CISO. And I have the ability to go in and do my own assessments, because the last thing that I want to have happen is bring in an external auditor and have a lot of gaps. I want to know what those gaps are so that I can either shore them up and resolve them or present them with a plan as to what I'm going to do as part of my continuous improvement program. So there's a lot of paths that you can take as a professional around GRC, and audit is just one of them.
Fantastic. And Sherry, any thoughts about how this could help people for their professional development or for their professionalism?
Absolutely. I'm thinking GRC, unfortunately, still sometimes is a sideline in organizations. We work with a lot of very large publicly traded companies that really, quite frankly, have not built out this discipline and don't really have the appropriate teams in place to run it. And so therefore it gets tossed on the plate of a lot of security and tech folks. And with that, they know what they know and are super smart for what they do, but they don't really have kind of that full visibility. So exactly what Rishi was saying, like this is a way to take a set of knowledge for a person and really expand your thinking. And then because of the nature of what this is, I think Sue brought this up, that this is supposed to help drive decision-making and risk management across the organization. And therefore you have opportunity to have visibility all the way up to the top of the organization, which really, quite frankly, is a great career benefit for someone personally.
I want to drive into a claim you just made there, Sherry, because that's your experience. Let's talk about other people's experience of seeing security just get dragged into or have GRC dumped on them unexpectedly. That's based on what you've seen from Sue, Jack, Rishi. Have you seen this as well in your careers? And can you talk a little bit about why that might not work?
It's two separate skill sets, and hardcore security people want nothing to do with GRC, and that's not a dig, but security operations people really and truly love to follow the threat. That's what they do, threat intelligence and manage alerts. GRC it's really kind of like, I don't want to downplay it and say it's pushing the paperwork, because it's super important, but it's two completely different skill sets. You would never put a GRC analyst in a SecOps position, and you never, vice versa, you never put the SecOps analyst in a GRC role. Their heads would explode.
Yeah, I will say so. Say those who, if you have GRC knowledge and you're a SOC analyst, you're very dangerous.
You are dangerous.
You
yes.
are dangerous because oftentimes, and what I've seen, like people in technology, in security, are very passionate about what they do, and GRCs to them seems like an overhead a lot of times. And not because they have ill intentions, but more so because whenever they've been curious about it, the answers they get, the descriptions they get, the way people describe GRC makes it sound like a very complicated thing that should not interest them. They don't really see value in it. But if GRC is well understood, if the value that GRC is articulated in a way that people understand, then dumping GRC on someone can actually have very positive outcomes. Because at the end of the day, if you have a risk culture in your organization where accountability is understood, where consistency of maintaining your compliance obligations is achieved, then you are doing a lot of things right. You not have to see the auditors that you don't love as much if you do GRC right.
Rishi, one of the most loved people on earth whenever he rolls into an organization. Anybody else here on the just the thought, or should we move to our next question?
Absolutely. I'd like to
Jack, go ahead.
pick
Yeah.
on what Rishi was saying there. I mean, I'm a technologist, right? And when I first started to do GRC, I felt that it was very compliance driven. And, there's a real difference between being compliant and being secure. And, I was resistant to it. And the more I leaned into it, the more I learned it, the more I embraced kind of the framework of it and understood how it helped me better articulate risk, better articulate the value of what it is we're generating and why we're doing what we're doing. And it became a bridge for me to have better and more effective conversations with stakeholders outside of IT and with executives. And when you take the technology aspects, you add the GRC aspects, it now gives you a much better way to be a more effective communicator, both up and down in the organization. You're able to get more support for your projects, for your spending, and you're also able to show a better return on the value that you're generating, right? A lot of times with spend that we do, the projects that we do, it's difficult to show a value return. And GRC helped me do that because we became more of a risk-based organization. We were clear about our risks, our priorities, our goals, our objectives, and what we accomplished.
Fantastic. And Jack, we're going to keep this next one on you because hang on. I think I went one slide too many. No, I thought our next question was about risk, but it is not. Jack, still going to keep it on you, though. What could an organization use the model to improve?
So I am not as an official auditor. Sue may cringe at how I probably might use GRC, but I have really used it as my vehicle to move things forward. I have used it in so many ways to help identify what we need to do, get outside opinions on how to better prioritize it, get sponsorship to make that change in the environment, implement the change, and then measure its effectiveness and to be able to report that so everybody clearly knows, what we found, what we did, and how it benefited us. So I've used GRC as my vehicle to move the whole security program forward for very technical things, all the way to things that are very audit regulatory based. I use GRC as my way to, really as almost my dashboard for the security program and really IT overall. It's where if anybody wants to know what is the current status of, a project, a risk, what's going on, that's my board, right? I use that SQCD board, right? The Kanban board. And I follow the GRC process through that for everything that happens in the department.
Fantastic. So some possible cringeworthy reactions here. Sue, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't cringing. So I think that it's a good mechanism to use. So I go back to risk, so GRC should be wrapped around a risk framework. And, that is your decision-making stick, basically, right? It's how you're going to make decisions. But If you use GRC and the model as your guideline, you can honestly, you can do your own assessments, your own audits. Depends on how in depth you want to get with them, but take a sampling. And I think Rishi said it before, it's around consistency. And if you have consistent and repeatable processes that are used, and I love to use, employee add, change, and delete as a fine example, right? If they're being used consistently, then your organization is at least protected from an onboarding and offboarding perspective. It may be chaos in between that, but consistency and repeatability, and you can measure that with GRC. So it really is that measurement stick for you.
Fantastic. Who wants to come in next on this one here?
Yeah,
Sherry?
yeah,
Sherry?
and with that, I would add another nuance to that in that somebody mentioned it earlier, compliance is not security and security is not compliance, but they're very, tightly coupled together, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive if done well. And so with that, we work with a lot of clients who, they want to be successful with audit. We help them do that. That's great. But you never stop there. Like, it's not about that. And I think this maturity model can help to basically like break that perception across the organization, because we'll see that with our clients of, oh, well, our SOC 2 audit was fine, so we're fine. Okay, let's have a different conversation. And the different conversation is, that's great that you were successful with your audit, but if you stop there, you're quite frankly not being a good steward of your business. And I think this maturity model, and I think Jack kind of alluded to it a little bit, like this is a voice, a talking point to show people, celebrate the audit, celebrate the wins, celebrate what we are doing. But on the flip side, don't live in this false sense of security where we're good and we don't need to really worry about anything else. And I see this maturity model as chasing something that we really, quite honestly, never achieve, because we're chasing improvement, we're chasing better stewardship, we're chasing integrity of our programs and how we run them.
So really it's about chasing improvements, but also celebrating the auditors. Rishi, how do you feel about being celebrated today, my friend?
Well, I'm an ex-auditor. I was not particularly celebrated, which is why I switched to the other side to make audits easy.
That's great.
But when I hear the question, right, what could an organization use the model to improve? Having the model, and I have a healthcare client currently, so I'm going to use a healthcare analogy. It's like getting your blood work done. When you see all the levers and the true results of where you are, you know what underlying problems exist where. You see your high cholesterol and your high blood pressure could be related to something else. So using the model will help you improve anything you want, because it is all represented in this holistic view. So it will give you indications of what's working where resources don't have to be prioritized. And then when you see different problems, you can prioritize where you want to focus your effort. So you can improve where you need to drive effort most. You can improve the areas where you have the biggest pains. You can have two areas where it hurts a lot, but you will know which area hurts more when you have that holistic view. So I view the model as your overall blueprint, as your overall blood report that gives you a way to better health.
Okay, I have to comment on that. I totally agree with you, Rishi, but hold on. Can I just take my cholesterol med? Can I just take my blood pressure med? I don't actually need to make any improvements and changes. And don't we see that across companies so much?
Exactly.
Give me I have it, my easy button. Just give me my easy button. I want to eat my fried chicken. I don't want to go to the gym. Leave me alone. Yep. But really, you nailed it. But that is kind of the state of things. And then this maturity model is like, nope, that's really not good enough to just keep taking your meds. Like, there's underlying things. Sorry, I could not resist.
That was so funny.
I'm glad you brought that in, and also with the easy button. I wish there was an easy button for GRC. Jack, I think you've got some drop in here too.
I just wanted to add to what Sue mentioned around the consistency. This was something that when I first started to get into GRC, I misunderstood. When I really started to take it seriously, I really started to follow the framework. I really started to be very consistent with what was I measuring, what was I reporting on, how are we doing it. My CEO actually pulled me aside and thanked me for the consistency of the report, the fact that it was easy to read, the fact that it was easy to digest and understand, and he started to include it in the board book presentation, right? This was something before many people in IT, or sorry, many people in the business found it difficult to digest and understand what was really going on in IT. They saw the projects, they could see the red, yellow, green, but they really didn't know what a lot of the words meant. When I really started following the GRC, had a much more consistent kind of dashboard. That consistency allowed me to be a more effective communicator.
Fantastic. And I think looking at the time, we're just going to move to our next question here. Sue, let's go with you on this one. So why would an organization choose, because you've talked about a lot, like there are a lot of models out there. There's certainly a lot of control frameworks out there. Why would an organization choose this GRC maturity model?
Well, as I said before, if you're starting out at square one, pick a model. This is a good model. I'm going to kind of change this just a hair, but I've worked with clients that have said things like, "We don't do process here," right? And so that's a red flag waving at me, and it tells me that their maturity is nil, not even step one, nil, right? Because they're not educated and they don't have an understanding of why GRC is important. And I go back to what I said before around consistency and repeatability. If you've implemented even the most basic program, even just a few controls, and you can do them well, then you can build upon that and start really having resilience. And so pick this model. It's not a bad model to pick. Pick a different model if you think it's easier, right? But pick something. And I think, as Sherry said before, if you're not really sure where to start, then ask for help. There's a lot of help to be had out there.
And I just want to go straight to Sherry, seeing how Sue brought you in. Sherry, let's go. Why would somebody choose this model? I think there is one other GRC maturity. Well, there's another one out there, sort of.
Yeah, I think, and I echo what Sue said. Like, pick something and pick something outside of yourself. This is a good model. If you find another one that you think is better, that's fine too. Do something. But what I do like about this one is it does have the intent is across the organization. It's not just security focused. The other aspect I like of it is that it causes you to think through like different threads within. And so again, it's something that's intended to be more holistic. It's not overly complicated. That's another thing, is there's things out there in the world that are very theoretical, very smart. They make a lot of sense. But I remember even when I first started doing this, I would read that stuff and I'm like, okay, I understand it theoretically, but how do I implement this? Like, what am I supposed to actually go do now? And I remember seeking external help in the organization I was in, because I was like, I don't know how to like make this actually happen in the real world. And so that is one thing I very much like about this, is I think you've struck the balance of theoretical, solid, like we have to think that through, but actionable as well. And quite frankly, so many of our clients, they know up here, it's the actioning part they get stuck with. And so this is helpful for that. And then the other aspect that I really do like is that this is not a security problem. This is not a tech problem. This is an organization problem if we're going to be good stewards.
Fantastic. Yeah, real problem there. Oh, go ahead, Sue.
I just want to add one thing. If you're looking for an advocate and you can't find it in your manager or the CEO, go to legal, because they're all about managing risk. And they may be willing to partner with you to bring the message forward as to why it's a good program. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. I always encourage people to have a cup of coffee with an attorney. Rishi or Jack, why would they choose this model over another?
I'll let you take it, Rishi.
Oh, thank you. Well, Sue and Sherry, you touched on very important themes, right? Pick something, right? And then Sherry, you talked about how this model is very holistic, right? I think when you read these things, understanding what they mean makes applying easier. And if you, as a GRC practitioner or a GRC leader, are interpreting things in a way because they've been written so not in English, it feels like English but not English. Because if they're open to interpretation, then what you implement or the actions that you drive from what you interpreted may not actually be true, may not be the most effective. So, why an organization should choose this model is because it is very easy to understand. It meets a very diverse set of audience where they are. Sure, some concepts where you are savvy may feel a little starting from level 101 and then going to more advanced levels. But it's very important to know that when you talk about organizations, GRC is not a person problem, right? There are a lot of different people with a lot of different motivations, with a lot of different goals, and with a lot of different levels of understanding about GRC. And in my reading of this model, I saw that this can be handed over very easily to a broad range of audiences who will make good use of it and understand what GRC is. So that's where I'm coming from.
Fantastic. Jack, anything on this? Why people would choose this?
Absolutely. So mine's a little bit of a broader take on this. As a security industry, we have a burnout and an anxiety problem. We've got way too many people that are leaving security, and we've got people who are choosing not to go into security or compliance because of burnout and anxiety. I go to a lot of conferences. I talk to a lot of people, and I'll talk to them one year, and they can clearly describe their problem. They can articulate the solution. I meet them a year later, and they have the same problem and the same solution, right? Or maybe they had a bad event, and they're looking now for a new job. They weren't fired; they just want to leave. And the common thread with this is the maturity of the organization they're in. Their organization is still focused on defense, protecting, trying to protect everything, trying to defend against everything. They're not having mature risk-based conversations. They are trying to push things from an IT organization only, and they're not having alliances with stakeholders in the business. They don't have support from legal. They don't have support from executives to make changes, and they're struggling. Right? They're losing the fight. They're getting breached or having events happen. They can't get projects done or sponsored, and their organization is at a low maturity level, focused on this very firefighting, and they've not matured to a more of a risk-based, conversation with other stakeholders. And a GRC model like this is how you do that. And that's kind of why I think you really need a model like this, and not just to kind of give it lip service and say, sure, we have a GRC meeting because we get together every 2 weeks. No, really follow the framework, follow the aspects of it, put it in place. The consistency that Sue mentioned. When I really started to have discipline around it was when I started to really see the results.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jack. Looking at the clock, we're getting close on time here. Rishi, let's give this next one to you about how an organization could conduct a maturity self-assessment.
I I know an answer, and it's got orange all over it. But without going into the how or the tool side of things, I think doing a self-assessment effectively is dependent on where you are. If GRC is a totally new concept, I would advise not self-diagnosing your problem. There's plenty of help, as Sue mentioned, Jerry mentioned, Jack mentioned, out there that can make that first visit to the doctor slightly easier, and then you can try holistic treatments at home. But if you are at a place where you have a program going, you understand GRC, then spending some time in reading the model, understanding the levers or the levels to which every aspect of people, process, and technology is broken down, and then going one by one, talking to the stakeholders, going through what you have documented, looking at evidence of how you've been executing on certain things is going to give you a more effective self assessment.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Rishi. And let's hear from others on how you could do a self-assessment. Sue, you look like you've got something on your mind.
I use one of the, I used to do it the hard way, right? I used to, have these elaborate spreadsheets and I'd go through all the different domains. My program, I implement for ISO, even if I don't certify, because it's the most stringent framework out there. So I used to do an ISO assessment, but I found something even easier, and I'll share it with you. So it's a on and off 1 and 0, the CMMC level 1. You can find the templates out on the internet. It's easy to use and it goes through all of the domains that you need for GRC as well as security. Is it extensive? No, but it's easy to use and it'll give you the maturity pretty quickly. If you get somebody to focus on the questions, probably get through it in an hour and a half. It's that easy. It's 0 and 1. You either do it or you don't. And then the second part of that is, can you produce evidence? Do you have a policy? Do you have the control? Do you have a policy? Do you have evidence that you can collect? And based on the measurement or the scoring that you have, it's a really easy, quick and dirty assessment. And it's very effective and it just doesn't take much time. So have at it, try it, see what happens.
Thank you, Sue. Jack, Sherry, on how organizations can self-assess their maturity. And then we do have one other question. It's going to be a lightning round.
Ooh, lightning round. Well, I'll just quickly say what I said at the beginning. Don't be generous when you're doing a self-assessment. And if you can't be realistic on a maturity self-assessment, then have someone help you do that. It's like, running your own blood work and making your own decisions. That's fine as long as you're going to, look at that cholesterol score and look at that blood pressure and be realistic about what it is and what needs to happen. I see it all the time. A requirement may be that you maintain asset inventories. Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But if a company is not bringing it into their procurement cycle, if they're not appropriately identifying an end of life and destroying, they don't have probably some sort of sustainable, system with the inputs coming in, reconciling back to discovery. Like there's so many other elements of maturity for one thing of maintaining asset inventory. So someone can look at that requirement and go, oh yeah, we're great. We're 5 on that. We're doing awesome. But then there's so many other nuances to maturity, even if maybe an auditor didn't call that out. So my main thing would be is just when you do a maturity self-assessment, there's no generosity to yourself. Like you want to hit yourself hard so that you know what to work on. Whenever I see risk assessments that companies have done in their risk registers with all of their residual risk low and medium low, I'm like, come on, people, let's kind of revisit that.
Fantastic. Jack,
I
last
completely
thoughts on
agree
this
with
one?
Sherry. There's been many times where, me and my team have sat down to gone through a self-assessment and maybe not through generosity. I would say more maybe to our ignorance of the control question, right? And maybe really understanding what is the criteria to meet that? What is the evidence to meet that? Are we really holding ourselves accountable to that? And we'll go through the self-assessment. And I encourage everybody to always do a self-assessment themselves to really internalize those controls, understand what the assessment criteria is, understand what the evidence is. Also, it will help you as a practitioner learn more about your own environment and really understand how things are done, and then bring in some from the outside that is a professional auditor, and then learn how they interpret the controls and what their control criteria is and what their evidence is. And it is always enlightening. Every time I go through a NIST control question or an ISO control question, I always feel like there's depending on who's on the other side of the table, how that is interpreted. And I always learn something from it. And I always look at my environment a little bit differently after finishing one of these self-assessments. I always feel like I have a better understanding of what we're doing and how we do it.
Fantastic. And for our last question here, as we get ready to close up, we're going to stay on you, Jack. So we've heard about how difficult this might be and how organizations might struggle to be honest with themselves. So Jack, who could organizations turn to if they need more help? Quick questions, answers on this one.
We'd all be happy to help you guys through your GRC journeys, help you secure your organizations. Inversion 6 offers those services. We use wonderful tools like Hyperproof to help us through that stuff. And there are a lot of great ways out there to, look for outside help. There's great resources on the internet. So there's things at no cost, low cost, and high cost all across the board.
Sue, Sherry?
Same comment. We're all happy to help.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Same comment. I was going to say, yeah, thanks, Jack, for the shameless plug for all of us. And yes, I highly advocate a tool. I see way too much of this in Excel still, honestly, there's really no reason for that. But on the flip side, I see companies go and buy tools, have no idea what to do with them. And that's not the answer either, is the reality. And so, this is a discipline. It's come up several times on this call, but you don't just stick this to whoever, tech person, security person, random person, like, oh, well, you can just do this. It's really not that big a deal, right? Just go do it on your spare time. It doesn't work that way. That's being a highly, again, not a great steward of the business. But I think you have to recognize that there are people who have done this. There are people that know the expertise of this. They know the nuances and they know how to action it all the way through. And, again, Jack, Sue, Kane, we're all here to help companies be successful.
Absolutely. And I know Rishi had to leave early because he had an emergency he had to deal with, but also I know that they'd be happy to help organizations do those self-assessments. Sue, just briefly.
One last comment that I don't think we brought up, which is enlist your business. You need to have control owners. And so if you spread the wealth, because you can't do it without your business partners, they have to be responsible and own these controls. So control owners.
I love that, bringing in the business. And with that, I want to provide a couple resources here. So if you haven't got a copy of the GRC maturity model, there is a QR code right there where you can download it. It is 120 plus pages or so. And if you have, this is our second webinar in our GRC maturity model series. If you haven't heard enough, if you'd like to hear a little bit more, at the end of August, I think on August 30th, the link will be up on Bright Talk. We are doing a presentation on how to do a self-assessment of your maturity model. So if you'd like to use some basic resources that Hyperproof is going to be providing, we're going to put together a simplified questionnaire that will be online, and we'll be talking through both how to use it as well as how to interpret some of the results from it. With that, I want to thank our star-studded panel. This has really been fun, friends, for having you all on. I wish we could have done this in person on stage. Maybe that'll be the next attempt of this, but this has just been absolutely great. I want to thank our audience for staying on. I recognize we did run long today. So with that, we're going to close out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And out.
That was great.